This is That One Audition with Alyshia Oxy.
Hey writers, what are your New Year's goals? Forget hitting the gym or dry January. How about writing a brand new TV pilot? Hi, I'm Tanya Bhattacharya. I'm a working writer, co-executive producer who's written on over a dozen shows, including Bel Air, A Million Little Things, and Ginny and Georgia. And I'm also the founder of TV and feature film writing school, Script Anatomy. I am super excited to bring back Script Anatomy's Pilot Palooza 30-day TV writing challenge in 2025, starting January 1st. With the challenge, you'll develop and write a new pilot in 30 days with me as your guide. Each day, you'll get lessons, tips, tools, and assignments to help build your story from concept through development, outline, and draft. We'll cover all the fundamental building blocks necessary to write a kick-ass script. And we'll use specific shows as examples so you can see how what you're learning applies and is illustrated in every single pilot. You'll also be able to connect with other writers on a private forum. Then on day 31, we'll celebrate your accomplishments together on a live Zoom. What are you waiting for? If you're ready to commit to your writing dreams, then you'll find this fun and motivating. And you'll start the year with a new sample by February 1st. All of this for just $175. That's less than a fancy coffee a day. So why don't you check out pilotpalooza.com for details and sign up?
So we were already talking off mic about us being represented at the same management company that we both love. And I have to start the interview here, and we're going to have to reverse engineer because Courtney posted the Crossing Over Express. I watched it, Luke, and I know you're getting this reaction. I know you are. I watched it 10 times in a row.
Wow.
From an acting perspective, from a storytelling perspective, from a producerial perspective, it's a genius primitive piece of a story. Like we all nice. Go through this. So as an actor, a writer, producer, we were already talking that you took a break from acting, you came back. I would love to know the vehicle at which this came full charging in, because from my research, you started producing like late 2008, 9. You've been writing for a while. You've jumped in front of screen. I just really want to know, where did this birth from?
As a whole, or that actual specific short?
That specific short. And then I want to work backwards because I think so many actors, especially nowadays, you can't just act. You can't just wait for the audition. I don't know what your audition is right now, but auditions could be few and far between. We're throwing out self-tapes. So I don't think even our managers rep us because we're multi-hyphenates, right? Because we're trying to shepherd stories that we're excited about. I'm curious what got you to tell this story, to put yourself in the center of it, because I noticed in a lot of your things that you produced, you're great at being like, I'm in, I'm not in. I don't need to be in as an actor. I'm over here, I'm writing. So yeah, I would just love to know it all.
Sure. We can work our way backwards with the Crossing Over Express, which whoever hasn't seen it, it's this short that I made that I co-wrote and directed and acted in. And it oddly took off 2 weeks ago. And all of a sudden we have Variety reaching out and Patton Oswalt tweeting it. And it's just this very interesting process from making a no budget short film. But it stemmed from, and anyone who has seen it, this is in the tweet that I put out, but it's, my mom passed when I was young. I was 17, and weirdly, just when I moved to LA and with my relationship with my dad and stuff, I really have hardly any pictures of her. I have zero videos of her. And so in this way, I hadn't really seen my mom or heard my mom's voice in 20 plus years. And a few years ago on my birthday, I'm at a red light and I just get this text that just says happy birthday from a number I don't know. And it just has a YouTube link. And I click it and my heart stops because it's my mom. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I pull into a 7-Eleven parking lot and I watch this video, and it's my mom. She's just talking into camera, basically saying, I'm proud of you. I wonder what you'd become. Have you become a policeman or a clown or a preacher or any of these things? And I'm just like, what is happening? And then I watched again, and I noticed that like at the bottom of the video, it says like 1999. It's clearly like a VHS camcorder. And so I write back to this phone number. I'm just like, who is this? And it turns out it was my friend John Catania's dad, who had been moving, and in his move had found all these VHS tapes from high school, and he had digitized them all and he had found this clip and decided to just cut it out and send it to me. So he just got my phone number from John, and it was just crazy. You know what I mean? And so I'd had a lot of feelings of like how down the road, like at first I just processed this whole thing, but then a few months later, I was like, how could I turn this into a piece of storytelling or a piece of art? And I think the first thing I just like vomit drafted out was a version of what I just told you, like a version of that happening. And it was the most hallmarky.
It's like, it's real life. You can't pitch it in a room. Yeah. Real life, sometimes you're like, no, that would never happen.
Even when I reread it like a week later, I was like, this is so cheesy. I'm glad I got it out of my system, but I'm not doing something with this. And then a long period of time went by, and the thing stuck with me. Whenever I would tell people the story, it resonated enough that that kind of morphed into me wondering, what if I could have responded? What if we could have that sort of one more conversation we didn't expect to have? And that kind of turned into what's a different story that's inspired by this. And so we made this short called The Crossing Over Express that's essentially about a woman who claims that she can raise the dead in the back of a truck. And so this guy takes his money and isn't totally sure if she's real or not. And this woman supposedly raises his mom in the back of a truck, and he gets to have that one conversation. And it's interesting because in the short, I'm a blubbering mess of almost just like, it's a confessional for a while of just like the things. And that was inspired by when my mom did pass. I got to go into her hospital room one more time, and it turned into this. It's a different confession, but it was like a bit of a confession. And I've since learned that that's very common. Like people don't know what to say. They're like so flustered, and they just end up apologizing. Yeah.
So walk me. Okay, so this is one location. The woman in the truck, played by Dot Maureen Jones, is amazing. Friend of the pod. She did this. I'm curious from a filmmaking standpoint. Did you guys shoot that, 2 days?
Shot it in one day. Had our we had our production designers pre-decorate the inside of the truck so that we wouldn't have to spend 3 hours decorating it. And then literally we showed up. We basically pulled a box truck into a friend's kind of studio space so that we could use as air conditioning. So we essentially shot inside the back of a truck, but parked on a stage so it wasn't so hot because it was like June. And yeah, pre-lit it in a couple hours, shot 85% of the day with the inside stuff. And then we literally drove the truck and a skeleton crew to an abandoned lot and stole all the exterior and car scenes in 2 hours or less. It was a wild day.
What did you guys shoot on?
We shot that on a Blackmagic 8K for the film nerds out
shot.
there. DP William Helmuth, yeah, he was amazing.
Incredible. Okay, so now here I am as an actor, anybody that's listening, and everybody's trying to run around and make something, right? Sure. So they have a good reel or they have something to say. That's one part of the journey. The other part of the journey is, okay, what was your initial idea for making this short? Did you want to be able to make it into a feature or a series? Because I want to know, flipping over to the marketing side of it, this goes viral on X. How? I want to know the how part. I used to do a bunch of videos that went viral in like the late 2000s, right? But that was when Yahoo was starting to do viral content. Like they would put us on the front page. There was like a way in which we could spread the word. And it was like a 3-minute, it's called the flip side, right? We could like flip things, right? But I
had the same thing. Like the way I left acting was that I started working with Funny or Die in like 2012. And that was my first foray ever. The first anything that I ever wrote in my life was 2012. And it was a thing for Funny or Die. And I'm very familiar with that time period of like how things could go viral. You had to keep them under a certain amount. This, like the plan wasn't necessarily to go viral. It was like it released via a YouTube channel called Short of the Week, which I've been a fan of for 10 plus years. I've been rejected by them many times, and this got accepted and they put it out. And I don't know what I expected necessarily, but in the first few days or week, we maybe had, 10,000 views or something, which is great. Like, won't complain about that. But I don't know. I just, the few people I'd shown it to, like private link beforehand, I never had something resonate so strongly. Like it just got such a response that I was like, I think more people will find this. And I just decided, I read this article about how even studios, and when indie movies would used to come out, they would not give actors the trailer file, for example. They would want it all to be pushed towards one centered site. So they'd have like their YouTube channel or their Instagram, and they'd say, push that out. We don't want it spreading everywhere. And now people have realized that nobody has even the attention span to click out of a social media site to the other social media site. So they're just shotgun it out and see where it takes off. And I was, you know what? I'm just going to put it everywhere. And so I just put it on X with that story. And I woke up and it had like quickly gotten crazy. And I was like, oh, this was what I was hoping would happen. It's a story that I think the thing about death, sadly, is that everyone can relate to it, whether it's the fear of your own death or someone close to you who's died or whatever it is. There's no one that can't relate in some way. And so I feel like it did have a sort of central way of resonating with people because it was very personal to me, but it's also something that's very universal.
Completely. I think that's why I had to keep watching it over and over again. And you can't not be impacted from the moment.
And it's been like the thing about watching it over and over again. And I think that's the thing that's gotten me more like, I'm like overwhelmed, to be honest. Like I've shared some of these with my wife. I haven't put some of them on social, but I will have people messaging me saying like, my brother died 2 weeks ago. I've watched your short a dozen times. It's my like cathartic thing now. And I'm like, that's just like crazy. It's like crazy and I think as artists, like whenever we make something, whether we're acting in a stupid comedy or we're making a horror movie or whatever we're doing, our goal is to affect people in some way. And I've been a part of other things or help make other things that I think had a good response. But I don't know that I've ever had something that kind of resonated at that level. And it's been really overwhelming and really cool to see. That's not a complaint. That's the dream.
No, not at all. Now it's interesting to take that relevancy or that impact to see how you can broaden it, right? As an artist, or keep it precious and let it be exactly what it is. It is so impactful that you don't need 90 minutes. What's so great about the storytelling that I want to commend you on is you really don't need 90 minutes to deliver this message. What is it? Is it 11 minutes?
Yeah, it's like 11 minutes. And to be totally fair, now we are going to try to expand it because I do think there's a bigger story there and a way to do it in a way that could be a full movie without losing the effect. But I do agree. I think what helped it, I've written other stuff or made other stuff where it was meant to be a proof of concept. And it was like, I'm doing this to make the other thing. This was not that. This was like, I just wanted to make this. And I hadn't directed something, but I'd worked with enough people as an actor or as a producer and I was like, you know what, on a short, I'm going to just do this. I think that made it a better short, to be honest. I think it's because you weren't trying to make
the intention wasn't to like, let me hold back some stuff because I'm going to put it in the feature or let me give you just a slice. Let me tease this out so that you want more and you come in. Okay. So then let me reverse engineer this because I like this. All things are cyclical, right? Birth, death, rebirth. Was the plan always, I want to be an actor? And then the writing was an offset of that. The producing was an offset of that. Or was intention something else when this began?
Yeah. I wanted to be an actor, like in high school, like probably most of your guests had some sort of experience where for me, it was Arsenic and Old Lace, the play that probably 80% of high schools across America do at some point every year. And it hooked me. I got to play Dr. Einstein, who his very first line of that play, no matter who's doing it, gets a pretty big laugh. And that was it. The ego inside me wanted it. And so when I moved to LA, I did all the awful things that every actor possibly does. I did every terrible student film and non-union commercial and everything. And I had been at it for a long time and really had no success, to be honest. And then I had two roommates that were much more successful than me. One was a composer, Matt Messina, who did like Juno and Up in the Air. And the other one was a great actress named Carly Craig, who would work a lot with bigger comedy troupes, David Wayne, the Farrelly Brothers. And that was when Funny or Die, which for anyone listening that's on the younger side of things, was Will Ferrell's sort of short form comedy site. This is like 2012. And she basically said, you're funny on Twitter. Why aren't you writing and making your own stuff? Write something, make something. I'll take it to Funny or Die. I'll be in it, etc. So I made this sketch called Growing Up with Gosling
Yes.
I played Ryan Gosling's childhood best friend, who he would try to cast as the other lead in all of his movies, only for the studio to replace me with a woman in the first couple days. And so the short kind of goes back and forth between me and Ryan Gosling wearing these like matching tank tops and glasses, and then clips of his movies where I'm green screened in place of Rachel McAdams or Christina Hendricks or whoever it is. And this short that was probably made for $1,000 or whatever was suddenly in the LA Times and Variety. And that for me was such a light bulb moment of I'm getting more from this nothing thing that is 3 minutes long than the 8 years of auditioning for terrible things before. Yeah, that was my kind of foray into, and then eventually got me off the path of acting.
That's okay. So that was my question, is how do you hang that up? Because I had a conversation with somebody the other day and they're like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not an actor anymore. And I was like, does Julia Roberts get to say that? Like if she does a film every 4 or 5 years, she still calls herself an actor, but like, and I know it's Julia Roberts and she has her like bank account, but let's take her bank account out of it. Right. And she just works every once in a while. It's interesting as us actors that are trying to make a name or trying to be relevant, we feel, oh, I guess that's done versus, oh, I'm focusing more over here. So I want to know, like, your mental state. Was Funny or Die It was like, here's a paycheck, so you're a writer now, you just don't have time to act? Or were you like, I don't even want to go to these auditions because I'm getting so fulfilled over here?
No, both. I mean, it was more like, I'm a huge believer in when doors open, walk through them sort of thing. And as cheesy as that is, it's like when something's working and you're liking it, you're enjoying it. It's different if something's working and you hate selling cars or whatever. But if you're enjoying it, I'm pro pushing into it. And when I started doing stuff with Funny or Die, and they were mainly just like short sketches at the time, it just felt like I was having more momentum right off the bat. And granted, on those first ones, I would also act in them. So I was still getting to be an actor and still doing those things. But at one point, I had met a director producer that I enjoyed working with. And he and I both had decided we love doing these things together, but we want to make our first movie that I would write, he would direct. And I just think at that point, I was like, I'm going to push full on in to making this part of the journey happen. And I'm going to put aside the auditioning for non-union commercials and awful things at that moment. And as far as not being an actor, it's weird. I used to have this thing and I don't have it anymore. And it sucks to say this because now I am working more, but like at the time, I think as actors, whenever we're not working, if we're not having the success that we're hoping for, a lot of people, myself 12 years ago, was almost like ashamed to say the word actor because it just felt so like, what are you, a server? You know what I mean? Like it's like that joke.
It's the only profession that somebody makes you prove, right? We're like, I'm an actor. Show me how. I'm an accountant. You're like, oh, how many people do you do accounting for? Nobody makes you prove it.
And I fell into that trap big time where that would make me like almost ashamed or embarrassed to say I'm an actor. And it's like, when the whole time I loved acting, it was never that I didn't, but I think you mix that with then starting to have more momentum happening on the writing side. And I just pushed into it. And now I'm like very proud to say I'm an actor. Like I love it. I think it's
You're many things. I know some people hate the word storyteller, but you are a storyteller. You tell stories, you write stories, you produce stories. You're part of the story. I don't know what is a better word than that, but some people get a little cringy with it. I don't know what else could really truly encompass all your talents, and why be on just one lane? You've got a highway going. You're not a 2-lane street. You got a full highway going full speed ahead. And
for me, it was like, I think taking my focus away from acting and focusing on something else that was working more only benefited me years later when I came back to it.
So 2 questions. So before we come back to it, since you're starting to write and producing and you're doing these, and in some stuff you're in, some stuff you're not. The other stuff you have to audition people and or send offers to. What did you learn by being on that side of it that helped once you came back into acting, change your auditions or change your meetings?
I think it was like, I think the 2 things that really changed my perspective as an actor. One of the things that made me just agree to push into the writing and doing and quit acting at the time was seeing how we cast our first movie, where we were offering SAG modified low budget scale. So it was like $320 a day at the time or whatever it was. And we're meeting with actors who are series regulars 5 seasons into shows, and we are like, they're not big enough. They're not big enough for like selling our movie, for the whatever the producer side of things. Yes. I'm thinking to myself, if I'm not casting this guy, who's casting me? And so that was like a very big moment for me on the negative. But then the positive of that was like, I think it was easier to, I don't want to say the word accept, but this is the reality of certain things. How can I elevate myself to be in a position to be, whether that's not doing the lead role, or if I'm going to do the lead role, it's like, how can I create my own content to a point that I am a person that could be in that? You know what I mean? Like I got to do a movie earlier this year that I was like the lead in, which just like never happens for me. And the reason that happened was that director saw a movie that I wrote, produced, and acted in myself. So it was like, if we hadn't made that movie that got me back into acting, I still would have been in the conversation of, yeah, no way. You know what I mean? But the fact that director had seen the movie and could say, I've seen this person somewhat carry a movie. I like what he does.
Yeah. And he knows the structure of a movie too. If you're writing it, you're directing it, and you're starring in it, I can trust you to take care of the whole arc and journey of this film. But yeah, I do think it's a tough realization when you come to the business side of it. And us as actors, we take things personally. We're sensitive.
Sure.
But also you cannot take things personally. And once you understand the business, then you can figure out a strategy to be in alignment with the business. Or like right now, I have this conversation going on the podcast between development and relevancy, and we vacillate between the two. It doesn't matter. Even McConaughey stepped into a development space when he decided, I don't want to do rom-coms anymore.
Yep.
So for 2 years, he was in development. When he was doing Dallas, until Dallas Buyers Club came out, until True Detective came out, then he was relevant again in this space, right? So it's so interesting that you decided to step away from letting anybody else make decisions about your development process, and you spent time on the development process, and now you have moments of being really relevant. And then how do you capitalize on that relevancy? I would assume that people seeing this short, the Crossover Express, you're in a relevant space. Now, how do you springboard that to the next thing? And that's really how this business works. You vacillate, you juggle between the two.
I think it's also hard too. And just goes back to like why I'm so pro creating your own content while you're waiting for the audition to happen and stuff, is that in this industry, nobody trusts anybody. So it's so rare for somebody to say, oh, I've never seen you do this thing, but I just trust that you're going to be able to do it. Even if you've done other things at the top of the game, it's just hard, especially if you're not McConaughey. So for me, even when we made a movie called Faith-Based in 2020, that's like how I ended up meeting our managers or started working with them.
And this is the movie that brought you back into acting, because I want to catch the audience up that it wasn't like you came back with an audition. You weren't like, here's my Scorsese audition. It was like, okay, I'm going to come back as an actor, but you... And
even that was, so it was a little bit organic in itself too. So that was a scenario where we had spent the last 8 years. We made our first movie in 2016, which was like a little indie called Fear Inc. It premiered at Tribeca. That kind of led to working more in that space. So we would just what you do, you develop things, you pitch things, you sell things, you produce other people's things. And I did this for 8 years. And I had gotten to a point that we weren't super happy with the specific types of projects we were producing. We wanted to do one of ours, and we had this idea. I grew up super religious. I find the Christian film industry incredibly fascinating. My dad is a part of a church that would, when any Kirk Cameron movie comes out, it would rent out a theater and take vans to go see it. So that Kirk Cameron awful movie would make $40 million. And you're like, how does it happen? And you're like, oh, wow. This is how it happens. And so I just found it so fascinating because I read an article about PureFlix, which if anybody doesn't know PureFlix, they're like the Christian Netflix, and they make the worst movies imaginable. But these movies will make $12 million on a $500,000 budget. It's so crazy. So we had this idea that was, what if our movie was about these two guys who came to this realization that all these awful Christian movies make a lot of money if they star Kevin Sorbo or whatever. And so they set out to make a bad Christian movie, even though they're not Christians and they don't know how to make movies. And originally we were going to make this for $10,000 on our phones. We were going to improvise most of the movie and just make it feel like an actual mockumentary. And at some point in this early process, I was like, I'm just going to write the script and we could still improv off of it. I'm going to have it there. Wrote the script. We start trying to send it to people. And I've never really had this happen where just like everybody said yes. So suddenly we had it was just like, I think it's because it's, I don't know. And
it's funny. It's really funny. I think it might be one of my favorite things you did besides the crossover express. I'm like, this is genius to turn it on its head.
And I think it's also a lot of actors don't get to do as much of that. So I remember the late Lance Reddick, who I love and adore and is the best. He played my dad in the movie. And I'll never forget, we're sending it to him thinking there's no way that like, this is the first actor we sent it to. We were just like, let's just try Lance Reddick. So we try him and we get this call and the agent's like, hey, Lance loves this, but he wants to play this other character, which later went on to be played by Jason Alexander. And so he just thought this other character was so funny. He's like in a bathrobe ranting about the Amish and a pyramid scheme and all this stuff. And so we said, Lance Reddick can play whoever he wants to play in this movie, but can we just talk to him once? So we literally like talk to Lance, talk all about why we want him to play this dad. We tell him you can totally play this other character. And he was like, let me think on it. And like the next day we get a call that Lance wants to play the dad. And so then we start seeing to other, all of a sudden our DP who was going to do it on phones, he's like, hey, I have access to these 2 red helium cameras, and everything just kept going. So then we cast all these other people in it, and then it becomes like a real movie. And at that point I said, we should recast us. If we have all these people, we have David Koechner and Margaret Cho and all these people, we should just also.
How did you get them? Even Jason Alexander, I have to I had to pause right here. Like, how did you get Jason? I love Jason, but like getting Jason to read something, I've sent him a couple of things. It's hard to get anybody of that caliber that's so busy, even if they love it, right?
I agree.
Getting them attached, scheduling, everything.
Scheduling with Jason was its own thing. It was a funny thing because, I don't know, we sent it, we talked to somebody who connected us because Courtney at the time was at Innovative. They'd already cast somebody else in the movie from Innovative. And I called that agent. I was like, hey, what do you think about Jason for this? Do you think he'll do it? And she called the manager and then she called me back and she said, I talked to his manager. Thing about Jason is all he cares about really is like the material. And if it's a character he wants to play, she was like, and he'll read fast. So we were like, screw it. And I will say this. We made an Excel sheet, like a casting Excel sheet when we were making the movie, and one of our executive producers had to approve these certain roles. Mm-hmm. And at the top of our list, we had Jason, we had Danny DeVito, and I think we had John Goodman. We're like our top 3. There was another 25 people that we had on here. Danny DeVito, I think, was doing Dumbo and couldn't even get a hold of his agent. And I'll never forget this. The executive producer next to Jason's name wrote perfect, but impossible. And almost to the day, the same month, 1 year later, Jason went on Late Night with Seth Meyers to promote the movie. So it was such a like surreal, like a year ago, the executive producer was like, no way he's doing this movie. And 1 year later, he's on Late Night with Seth Meyers, like promoting the movie.
Okay. But I have to ask a producerial thing? Did you guys send him, here's the offer, here's the movie, here's the role? So you guys sent him an offer.
Whole thing. Pitch deck, pitch deck, a personal letter, like explaining why we wanted him to play this role. And then when we got the call, because again, zero part of me thought he was going to do this movie. Like, yeah, no part of me.
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
from scene study classes to audition classes,
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created The Bridge for Actors,
a collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
to a working actor.
Like, yeah. No part of me. This is a no budget movie. And we get this call on a Monday. I'm like at the gas station and the agent's just like, hey, Jason's in. And I'm like, no way Jason's in. And she's like, he's in, but he's doing a play here at this time, and he's doing a play here at this time. So he would need to get shot at this time, which is not even in the month that we're shooting. Okay. On top of it, my wife is 8 months pregnant. So we decide we're going to take one of our entire weeks of shooting and move it from May to July. So we're going to shoot the whole movie in like end of April, beginning of May for 2.5 weeks. And then we're going to shoot these like 4 days in July so that we can have Jason. And so then I call the agent. And once we schedule it, we're like, all right, we're going to shoot in July. And I call the agent and I say, I just want to let Jason know my wife is due on this date. So here's our plan. My friend Drew, who also has brown hair and is 5'9" and a good actor, he's going to be on call. And if my wife goes into labor, because it's a day away, we're going to shoot all my coverage. And then Drew is going to come in here. And I get a call an hour later that from Jason. And Jason's like, no, I don't want any of that in your head. I'll figure out this other schedule thing. Let's just push it till after your wife has the baby. So like we pushed it at that point again, another like 3 weeks, so that I wouldn't be like, is my wife going into birth the whole time we're shooting this like 9-page scene together? And I was very tired because I think my wife gave birth 5 days before I shot this scene.
Okay. And then tell me how you guys decided to keep you guys in. Because at this point, if you're getting all these, I don't want to say heavy hitters, you're also a heavy hitter, right? But you understand as a producer now.
I even know you now, but I think I suggested that. And I think where I owe my friend Vince, the director, is he was like, no, like you and Tanner are best friends in real life. Let's like have that chemistry on screen, and we surround you with these more famous people that can help sell the movie. You know what I mean? And I'm really thankful for that. He didn't have to do that. He could have said, yeah, you're right. Let's cast the star of NCIS or whatever. You know what I mean? And
it breaks the mold of the business that you learned early on at like when you did your first film, where it's like, oh, I can't even get, these people aren't going to help. But again, smart producing move. Like he said, you can still stack people around you.
Yeah.
And then faith-based is like your welcome home back to being in front of camera.
Yeah, honestly, it couldn't have been a better like situation. You're doing this role that like obviously is catered towards you, so it's easier and to get back into things. I hadn't acted in 9 years, really. Like I'd done a couple things where somebody would ask me to do one line in their indie thing or whatever, but I hadn't really acted. I hadn't auditioned once in 9 years, and it was a nice like way to get back into things. And it was also like, again, like you said, the whole town is such a, what's the person done? What's the person been in? It at least gave this thing to be like, hey, you've seen this in Deadline and on the Hollywood Reporter that this is his thing. You know what I mean? It was a better way, which was what Courtney pitched me on when we had lunch.
Well, so talk to me about the auditions that come in after Faith-Based comes out. You get all this press.
They're so
terrible.
Bad. They're terrible.
Okay, because it's a different muscle, right? I always talk about this. Being on set, working, getting your takes, working with the director, totally different muscle than, okay, Luke, here's your audition for All Mankind. Okay, here you go. Here's your audition for NCIS.
And I don't even know how, I'm sure if I rewatched Faith-Based right now, I would be like, damn, I wish I could do it again now. Because if there's one thing I think everyone should do just to even see their progress, not even just in terms of like credits and footage and stuff, but just performance is, okay, so backtrack. Courtney, manager, agent at Innovative that had worked with us in this movie, we have a meeting and she basically says, would you want to get back into acting? This is while we're in post on Faith-Based. I think it was like about to come out. And I said, no. And she was like, really? You don't like it? And I was like, no, I love it. I had an amazing time doing Faith-Based. I love acting, but I don't want to go back to doing what I was doing before the Funny or Die stuff. I don't want to just go back to this. And she was like, we use Faith-Based. We like turn this into a thing where you're not just doing these like non-union short films and terrible things. We use this and we get you real stuff. And I embraced it. And she's been like the best. Like it's been the best thing to happen to me. But it's funny. One thing I recommend every actor do is go back every few years and both look at old demo reels, obviously, but also look at old auditions and then watch your current things or your current auditions, your current demo reel. And maybe it's a little more on the extreme side for me because at this point, I don't know that I'll have the same feeling now as I will in 2029 when I do it again. But from not having auditioned in 9 years and having awful footage except for faith-based to now, it's a very like, oh, you see your growth as an actor and as a career and all these things.
I'm so glad you said that. I think in the land of self-taping, so many actors are against it, but I'm curious your point as a filmmaker. I love it. Not only that, because of this variable, I can, before I throw down an audition, I sometimes go back to a month ago or 2 months ago. That's what I think is so cool now with us being in this self-tape arena, especially you as a filmmaker, right? You know how you want to set up a camera. You know how you want to set up a shot.
Yeah.
I love it too. And then I keep a little log next to where I tape, because if I bump on something when I'm auditioning or I watch it back later, I'm like, oh, I missed that moment. So then I go and I look at it and I'm like, yep, okay, I'm going to do this. Or I'll go back and watch tapes and be like, damn, that was good. Okay, I'm not terrible. I'm not terrible. Yeah. I'm not terrible. I wasn't in the selection process. I wasn't selected, but I stand by my work. Or the opposite. I've seen some tapes of mine from 12 years ago, and I'm like, oh, I understand why that casting director won't see me now. Please, dear God, let them know that I'm a world different kind of actor. And when it's a good opportunity, I love to show them how far I've grown. Like, we can only measure, like athletes, they watch their game tapes.
Totally.
And then they improve. So I think that us being in this arena, when you used to go into the room, you couldn't be like, thank you so much, Jen Cooper. Can I see my audition? What are you going to send off? I'd love to see how I did this. They don't have time. And
I totally agree.
So I need to hear, if there is one that comes to mind, that one audition since coming back into this realm, into this world, that's either gone great, gone awry, been fun. Or even if you go through the self-tape, I would love to know how you, as a director, writer, when you get an audition, how do you do your whole setup? Either way you want to go with me, Luke, I'd like to hear it.
Sure. I think in terms of worst, or at least funniest, is, this is recent. This is like less than a year ago. Now that commercials have gone back 100% in person in LA, or not 100, but 90% in person in LA, which I'm struggling with, to be honest. I can't stand it. I had an audition recently with, bad story, a young girl, probably in her 20s. I'm 41. And the whole audition was, we were these two, it was like for Monster Energy or something. And we were two people that were supposed to be at a rock concert. And literally in the script, it's like they're cheering, this whole thing is happening. And all of a sudden in the script, she flashes the camera. And it's clearly based off of the, what are they called? This, not the sides, the like storyboards, clearly going to be like shot from the back. It's just the idea of this is happening. And sure enough, take one, 3 people in the room, she just flashes the whole room. And I was so like both frozen and also like mortified for her. But I felt awful because I was like, this is just this young new actress who just read the thing and expects yourself to go for whatever you're told to do. And so I'm both like, and you could just tell the poor camera guy who has to be like, okay, we don't actually need to. And I'm just sitting there frozen in fears. That was probably the weirdest, funniest, saddest thing, because it's just, I also just felt awful, to be honest.
People don't know what they don't know. And if they're not communicating, I had a lot of that happen at the beginning of my career. Not me particularly, but I've heard so many stories of people like, then my top fell off, then I'm over here doing.
I'm 100% positive that from that moment on, the rest of that day, that guy was like, and to clarify,
keep our shirts on today.
Because I've had the opposite too, where like, this is recently where like I've had 2 different things where something was supposed to be in like a hot tub or whatever. And honestly, I'm not even ashamed or care, but I was like, no, this is like a first call on your stupid commercial. I don't need to get down to my jeans and no shirt in this room with you. It's, if you need me to, I don't know. I have such boundaries. I have such weird mixed feelings on commercials in general, but like for that part, I'm like, no, I'm good.
It's humiliating at certain times where you're like, if they want you, they know if they want you. Also in the land of self-tapes, when you send off stuff like that, if you are taping stuff like that, where do those tapes go? And not that anybody was like,
no, but it's just like, this is also like a first call for some random commercial. It's maybe on the second one when you're like, hey, we're going to have to be on camera. We need to, whatever, but it's get out of here on this first. Like, this woman doesn't need to get down to her bikini on your first thing for this stupid VRBO commercial. I'd say my best recent commercial thing, to be totally honest, is the whole time I had been auditioning before I quit. And I could blame a million different things. It's probably just that I wasn't a good actor, but I could all day long. I've analyzed every version of, like, when I was 28, I looked older and I don't think I got those parts. So there's every version of us as actors that justify why we're not booking anything. But I had never booked TV one time. Like, I had never booked a TV show the whole time that I tried to audition. And I do think age plays into it, in the sense that I do feel confident that I've grown into playing someone in their 40s, and that's what I am better at and look like and those things. But it was discouraging, to say the least. And I will never forget when I got back into acting, booking a guest star in NCIS LA, which, like, for anyone who's been successfully acting for a decade, that's great. That's just another thing that you do. For me at that moment, it could not have been a more needed reassurance that I had chosen the right thing to give. I cried. Like, I straight up was like, oh, I cannot believe, because I honestly, like, I had done so many things like that never happened, that I had really convinced myself that this can't happen. This is not going to happen for me. I'm not going to book a television show. And at that time, I'm like 39. And it was like, and booking it was like, I think when Courtney called me, I was like, it was less about the role or the show or whatever it was. It was more just like a very needed, like, this can happen. And it totally weirdly changed my next, whatever it's been, 2.5, 3 years, which obviously in the big scheme of things is nothing, but it really did. Well, no,
truly, it's the mental game, right? I think that some things seem so out of reach when I'm coaching actors, or I'm working with actors, or even with my own career. We put things out of reach, or we take rejection or not being chosen as a sign of we're bad. It took me probably 10 years to realize, oh, my auditions might not have been bad. I've run into casting directors at Starbucks before, and then being like, I remember your audition. It was so great. And I'm like, really? Because I thought I bombed. And you just need that, oh, yes, I do know what I'm doing. I might not be selected for this, but I know I can do this. And I mean, you can do this. Your work speaks for itself over and over again. It's the audition process. It's the subjection. It's like the casting director, the producers, the director. It's the type of genre that we're in, like broadcast television. Sometimes do we work on it? Totally. Do we not? Whereas independent films, we can really bring forth an essence. We can really cultivate a story where we can fit in that story. We can take more time.
And I've had so many things, even to be honest, the last 6 months, that have just, like, things I didn't think happened, or I've heard the stories about somebody else, but never thought it really could happen, that have happened to me, and just like audition things, that it's fully, like, I hate to say restored my faith in the industry. I think the industry is struggling, but I guess it just all has given me more confidence that it's possible. And, like, certain things that you hear stories about can happen. Do you
have one or two things to share? Because I think it's helpful for actors to hear. And look, I also want to comment that you've been doing this for over 20 years. So sometimes it takes that long for things to start clicking to make a career versus a one-off job. So what clicked in the last 6 months for you?
I totally agree. It's also, and don't get me wrong, as much as I take the 20 years as like a learning thing, it's like only been 4 years that I've been back into acting. And so it's felt like a fresh start in that regard, which is nice. But I think that all those other things come with it in terms of experience and knowing those things. A few things that have just happened that are so small, but I think you just don't think they're going to happen, is I'll get a lot of pins recently. And I used to be a person that didn't have them often. So when I did have an avail or whatever, I always booked it. And I was just like, oh, if I'm on avail for a commercial, I'm going to book that commercial. Now I've had 7 pins in a row that did not go my way. And I'm like, now I'm the opposite. Now if I get pinned, I'm like, don't even tell me. Just call me when I can. I'm available. I'm available. But I've had a couple of times recently, like I got pinned for a huge show recently, and it was to be in almost every episode, huge role for me, opposite a massive movie star. And I was like, this is a game-changing situation. And then I didn't get it. And I found out like another movie star, another person I've watched since I was a kid got it. And I was super bummed. But I was also like, I didn't expect to get it. You know what I mean? And then the next Monday, Courtney gets a call that's, hey, they loved him for this role. They're still talking. They're trying to find something for him in it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. 3 days go by. Courtney gets a call that says, hey, we want to pin him for this other role. It's not as big, but they whatever. I'm like, this is going to be it. This is my consolation prize. You know what I mean? She gets a call on Friday. They're rewriting the character. It's totally different. Take him off. And I was like, come on. Then they send Courtney a nice email that says, I want to let you know we really are trying to find him something on this show. I'm like, okay. 3 weeks go by, nothing. Cut to, they brought me in for another like bigger role, and not as big as the first one, but another like multi-episode situation. Probably didn't get it, but I genuinely feel like that casting director is trying to find something for me on that show. Like they're not just saying it. And I think for me before, even 2 months ago, I would have been like, yeah, okay. You know what I mean? And I think I heard somebody on one of your recent episodes talking about like the casters that bring them back and stuff. It's like just that too. I've had certain people just bring me back a lot in a short amount of time where I'm like, all right, they actually are watching the tape and thinking about it. And I got to come back on this recurring role for All Mankind. And it was like another thing where I did 2 episodes last season, and somebody on the show made some comment about, I hope they bring you back. They're going to bring you back. And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. And again, I think in my mind, I'm like, this just doesn't really happen if you're not a person that's already on a show. And so sure enough, it's like, you get a call back that they're like, hey, Mike's in these episodes in season 5. And I'm like, they really did write him back in.
Really mean
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so those are just like such little things that I just didn't think were real for me.
I think that slides you over into the relevancy category, right? You've been focused on developing yourself so much over here that like it takes one casting director for you to be relevant to one casting director to get you multiple jobs, or the ball starts rolling, right? Something starts clicking. Once you get on set, they like you. They want to write for you. They want to figure out something. I truly believe that's the case, because I mean, we have to take those as not only wins, but like you're doing your job. There's so much stuff that people, the business side of it, oh, we don't have enough money for that episode because Brad Pitt's doing it. So now we have to rewrite it. So we don't have any other guest stars in this episode, or we have to do this, and this.
It's also been like, and this is me trying to encourage people who maybe haven't hit the thing they're hoping for or whatever it is yet. Was one of the things that was very positive for me is I got to do this movie earlier this year, and I think because I was the lead, the director let me in on some of the casting. Just like I read there's an actress that's supposed to be in high school, so I read with people, and I got to see some of the auditions and submissions and stuff. And one of the things that really took me aback in a positive way, as someone who is restarting, I don't even want to say late in life, but not 21, was I looked at the breakdown, the submission numbers for the different roles that that their casting director had put out there. And watching those numbers dwindle as the age got up was really for me a moment of, oh, like people really are moving away. People really are, if they're not famous at 55, then there's a lot less people at 55. At 65, there's 9 of you. It was like seeing those numbers was a really positive thing for me, because it was like the lead actress, who I think they'd put somewhere in the like 18 to 25 range or whatever, lead in this 6,000 people being submitted. The actress playing the principal, who I think it was written in the like 55 to 65 range, I'm going to go 40. It's like such a staggering difference. And so for me, it's a little, even the number, I'm 41, and like seeing the numbers of somebody in the 40s was like 100 and something. It was just like less people. And so it's a little bit of, I'm not trying to be the young ingenue on your hot show. I'm trying to be like the staff sergeant in 9 episodes. You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
Like,
the sustainable character that needs to keep things going. Also, then you don't have the pressure of the show on you. You have to carry the show. There's so many things that come into, I think, the longer that you're in this business. Is this a one-off for you? Is this a famous thing for you? Or is this a longevity thing where like you're going for a marathon? My favorite coach always says, it's not a sprint, honey, it's a marathon. This is a 60-year career. You're going to ebb and flow, peaks and valleys. Like we're going to go all over the place, but just stay the course as you transition through different places. I want to ask you about the book that you talked about, Mamet's book, True and False. Does that have such a big influence on how you approach acting now or auditions? I
read it and I have mixed feelings on Mamet just because of his more than odd political stuff the last handful of years, but I didn't know about any of that or think about that at the time. And when I got back into acting, so 2020, my auditions were just awful, to be honest. Like I looked back at some of the ones that I sent Courtney that were like my first 6 months of auditions when I worked with her. And I'm just all over the place and I'm like trying so hard and you can like see it. I'm like, Jesus, they're such bad auditions. But at some point in that process, I was looking for like things. And so I had that book recommended to me by another actor who I very much admire. And I think what it did for me more than anything else was just, I think that especially when you're not to a point, you're not Daniel Day-Lewis or whatever, where everyone just trusts that you're going to create the most incredible different character, that I think the strongest thing we have going for us is us. It's who you are. No one else is exactly like me. And so what I found myself doing on those auditions when I got back into it was trying so hard to create a perfect character. And so I would get the sides and I'd be like, all right, this is a hot shot FBI agent, yada, yada. And I could see myself in the audition, like trying to create this character. And I think that reading that book made me really take a step back and be like, what if I just did this as me? What if I just did this as Luke Barnett? This is just Luke Barnett trying to be as authentically Luke Barnett as he can. And he's just reading the lines from that character. And he's in this environment and he's dressed this way. And I'm not saying you have to do that. I think people can create great characters. But for me, all my auditions were suddenly 90% better the second I stopped moving around and figured out how on an audition to like what works when you're still, and I just was me. And I think if you were to watch my auditions for even the stuff that I've booked in the last year or so, it's most of them are a version of me. And if he's from Texas, he might sound a little different. He might do these things, but for the most part, I'm not like trying to figure out this character. I'm trying to be as authentically me as possible. And I think it's made them way better.
You're not putting anything on. There's nothing being put onto you. You're actually, I think a lot of people go to acting classes and schools and techniques and using all this, honestly, just to be able to be comfortable revealing parts of themselves, to truly, really be seen. And when you can be seen like that, we lean in. Like as a director, you lean in. Last question I have to ask in relation to this is the job that you said that you were helping cast or like being a reader. Are people coming in or were you watching tapes? What did you learn by the consistency of seeing whether it was the younger people coming in an audition or people in the older categories? Because I think it's so invaluable to watch other people audition.
I think I don't know if this is an age thing, but there's definitely a desperation factor that you can like sense. And it's not usually done in a way that feels like, oh, they're begging for the job or something. It just really feels like they're trying hard to nail this thing. And the people that are really good, again, they're just themselves. They're just like back. Yeah. They're really good. And they're really good at just feeling real and authentic and confidently delivering the role as that character. And I think nothing is going to make us more distinct from each other than being ourselves. And so until you are at some place where you are, or you've been given a role where they do want you to create this whole thing, which obviously is its own thing, I think the more we can get really good at being authentically us in these rooms and not coming off, that makes a huge difference. Like most of the actors that we like loved for the movie that was like a small movie, but we're getting some great actors in, they just were like really authentically them. And it just read great because it would just like in their audition, you're like, that's him. That's the guy. That's exactly what we imagined. And they weren't trying hard. They were just like really good, grounded actors. Like when you in faith-based, it's like when you're working with Lance Reddick could play the silliest thing. He's so funny because he's so Lance. He's so like authentic and grounded, and he grounds everything that he's in. If there was an actor that like tried to be this silly pastor, it wouldn't be that funny. Right. But when Lance treats it like it's Shakespeare and he's just happens to be wearing this like skin tight green screen suit, but it's Lance Reddick, like being Lance Reddick, it's hilarious. You know what I mean? And it's like the best actors have the ability to do that.
I think that's a testimony, I think, to also like you coming into your own as somebody who wants to take over telling stories or having stories to tell. I think that's why the Crossing Over Express, yes, it is a very relatable topic, but you showed us inside you. It brings me to tears every time. Oh. So I'm like so incredibly grateful that one, you came and just let me like go a little deeper in here, but also just like truly that you're still like showing up. You're coming back to For All Mankind. People need to like, please go watch the short. I'll put it everywhere. But you've got a gazillion movies coming out too. It just seems to be like you meeting yourself. The career is also meeting you at that same place, which you can't really educate a 20-year-old to do that. So sometimes our careers get better in our 40s because you know who the fuck you are now. Like
I totally agree. And I think you can't, you might be able to put a timeline on like when you can't play high school anymore, but you can't put a timeline on like when you're going to figure out like what you're best at or like who you are as a storyteller. So it's even as all of it, as a writer, as an actor, I genuinely do not feel like I figured out my voice and like who I am as a creative until 2 years ago at 39. So I think too many people put a timeline on things, whether that's goals or it's just who they are as artists. But I think you can't really do that because it's going to hit everybody different and in different ways.
Yeah, you couldn't say it any better. I'm so grateful to have finally gotten to talk to you. Where can everybody find you and watch all the fun things that are getting ready to roll out? You've got some fun things coming up.
Fun things coming. I'm on all the old social medias. I think on Twitter X, I'm at Luke Barnett. On Instagram, it's at I am Luke Barnett because an evil racist pastor from Arizona will not give me at Luke Barnett. So do not follow that pastor. And if you're going to watch something of mine, I'd either watch The Crossing Over Express, which is pinned to the top of my Twitter, or it's on YouTube. And yeah, check out For All Mankind. It's a really good show that I'm really excited to be a real tiny part of.
I'm so glad. This was so great. Thank you.
It's great to talk to you.